Okay, so 8 students have joined so far. I think I'll start the class now.
Yes, ma'am.
Right. Okay. Just a second. Just a second. I'm not able to move to the next slide. Okay. So I'm starting the class. If you have any problem with the audio or if you're not able to see the slides or anything like that, please let me know. Right? So what we're going to learn in today's class is we're going to learn about the contracts. What is the nature of contracts? What are the essential elements of a valid contract? And how are contracts performed and discharged according to the Indian Contract Act? Right? So, what are the various topics that we're going to discuss? We're going to understand what is the scope of law of contract, what are the various elements of a contract, and what are the different types of contract. Now, the Indian Contract Act 1872, what does it define contract as? It defines a contract as any agreement that is enforceable by law, right? So, what do you mean by agreement? When two people promise or make a set of promises to one another, that is known as an agreement. So, take for example, A makes a promise to B to sell his house for 50,000, and B agrees to that promise. And what does he promise in return? He promises 50. So one person is ready to give his house, another person is ready to pay 50,000 for it. So these are set of promises, and these set of promises are forming consideration for one. This is called as an agreement, right? So every agreement that is enforceable by law, such kind of an agreement is called as a contract, right? There could be agreements that cannot be enforceable by law. For example, A and B enter into an agreement to kill C. Okay? Can law enforce this agreement? It cannot. Right? Law cannot enforce an agreement where two people are agreeing to kill another person or take away somebody's property or things like that. So every agreement that is enforceable by law is known as a contract, right? So based on this, what can we say? We can say that all contracts are agreements, but all agreements cannot be contracts, right? Okay. Are you seeing the next slide now? Kinds of contract enforceability. Is that screen visible now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Right. So contracts can be classified into different types. Now there are certain parameters based on which these contracts can be classified. So the first parameter is enforceability. Can these contracts be enforced or not? To what extent they can be enforced? That is the parameter that is used. Right. So what is so based on enforceability, contracts can be of 4 types: valid contract, voidable contract, void contract, and unenforceable contract. Right. So what is a valid contract? A valid contract is a contract which has all the essential elements of a contract and which can be enforced by law. That means A and B enter into a contract. If A does not fulfill his part of the contract, then law can come in between and enforce. Law can say, no, no, you have agreed to this contract, you have to do your part. Law can come and enforce. That is known as enforceability, right? So any contract which the law can come and enforce, that is a valid contract. For example, see, I booked a cab from one place to another place, right? I got into the cab and I got down at my destination, but I refused to pay the money, right? Is there any law that can enforce me to pay the money? Can the law enforce me to pay the money? Yes, law can enforce me. Can you go? Can you travel in a cab from one place to another place and refuse payment? You cannot, right? There are rules, there are regulations, there are laws which will make sure that you pay that money. So that is a valid contract. Now, what is a voidable contract? A voidable contract is a contract which, see, there are two parties to the contract, right? A and B, any contract, A and B. For example, I told you just now, I book a cab from one place to another place. So I am one party to the contract. The person who's taking me, the driver or the Ola, Uber, whatever it is, that is the other party. Or A sells a house to B. A is one party, B is another party. So there are always two parties to a contract, to an agreement. So I told you a valid contract is a contract which can be enforced by law. Avoidable contract is a contract which can be enforced only at the option of one party and not at the option of the other party. That means, for example, A and B are there. Only A can get the contract enforced, not B. That is a voidable contract. Whereas a valid A and B can get the contract enforced. Now, why does this happen? We will discuss it in later. Why is it that in some contracts only one party can get it enforced and not the other party? We will discuss it. It will come later in the discussion. Then we will come back to it. A void contract is a contract, is a no contract at all. A void contract is a no contract at all. That means from the beginning there was no contract, so there is no question of law ever enforcing it. In a valid contract, both the parties can enforce. In a voidable contract, only one party can get the um, contract enforced. In a void contract, law cannot enforce the contract either at the option of either of the parties. That is a void contract. Coming to unenforceable contracts, see, sometimes some contracts, because of some technical defects, cannot be enforced by law. So that, though there is nothing wrong in the agreement or the contract, but because of a technical defect, for example, see, when you're buying a house or selling a house, there needs to be a sale agreement. If that document was not properly signed, then a law cannot get the contract enforced. Such kind of contracts are known as contracts. Just a second. I'll just move to the next slide. Right. So based on enforceability, we said that contracts are of four types: valid, voidable, void, and unenforceable. Now, based on the extent of execution, to what extent the contract has been executed, contracts can be divided into two types: executed contract and executory contract. What is an executed contract? Where both the parties to the contract have fulfilled their promises. That is known as an executed contract. For example, A promises to sell his house to B for rupees 50,000, right? B agrees. So B has paid 50,000 rupees. A has transferred the ownership to B. This is an executed contract. That means both the parties. B has paid the money. A has given the house. Both of them has been completed. This is an example of executed contract. What is an executory contract? Where promises have not been fulfilled, performance has not been done by either one or both the parties. So, for example, A and B have entered into an agreement to sell a house for 50,000 rupees. A has given his house, has transferred the title of the, has transferred the ownership, but B has paid only 40,000. 10,000 is yet to be paid. That is an executory contract. So there is something that B still has to fulfill from his end. That is known as an executory contract. Maybe in layman's terms, you can say incomplete contract, a contract which has not yet been executed. Maybe we can call that as an executory contract. Then, based on how contracts are created, right? How are they created? How do they come into existence? That is also, contracts can be classified based on that as well, right? So, based on the mode of creation, contracts can be classified into three types: express contract, contract, and quasi contract. Okay. So, what is an express contract? Express contract is where both the parties verbally use words, either orally or written, in order to enter into a contract. So A goes and asks B, will you buy my house for 50,000 rupees? B says, yes, I will buy your house for 50,000 rupees. This is an express contract. That is, they have very clearly shared in words, or maybe not orally. They could have written mails to one another, right? They could have sent letters to one another. If, even that is an express contract, wherever the terms of the contract are being expressly conveyed through words, that is an express contract. Implied contract is one where the parties do not clearly use words, but their intentions can be judged through their actions. Such kind of a contract is known as an implied contract. So I will give you an example of an implied contract. Take, for example, you walk into a restaurant. You sit at a table. The waiter comes and asks you, what do you want? You say, I want a cup of coffee. The waiter brings that cup of coffee. You drink the cup of coffee. And without paying, you get up. So when the waiter asks you to pay the money, you say, no, no, I never told you that I will pay money for this coffee. I just came and sat in. I thought you were giving it for free. Is this valid? No. The moment you go and sit in a restaurant, right, it is implied that whatever food you have there, you will pay for it, right? Whatever food you have, you will eat there, you will pay for it. That is an implied contract. You might not have expressly told in words that, see, what, before entering, while stepping into the restaurant, you must not have told the owner, or the manager there, saying that, whatever I eat, I will pay. We don't do that. We just go, simply sit, order, eat, and then we have to pay. That is an implied contract. So through words, through actions, when it is implied, it is an implied contract. Now, what is a quasi contract? A quasi contract is a contract where parties have no intention of entering into a contract. Okay? Parties have no intention of entering into a contract. But law creates it. Law creates it. That is a quasi contract. Why does law create a contract when parties have no intention of entering into a contract? See, the underlying principle behind quasi contract is that no person, right? No person would be allowed to unduly justify at the expense of another person. No person would be, allowed to unduly benefit at the expense of another person. So I'll give you an example of a quasi contract. Take, for example, A goes to B's house, right? Uh, A forgets 10 kgs of rice bag at B's house, right? A forgets the 10 kgs of rice bag at B's house. Now what B does? B uses that rice. He cooks, he uses it for his family, he cooks it. Now, after 1 week, A realizes that he forgot his rice bag at B's house, and he comes and asks B, where, see, I forgot my rice bag, where is it? So B says, you forgot it here, I used it. So A says, okay, fine, if you've used it, fine, now pay me money for it. B says, no, I never promised to pay you money. It was your mistake. You forgot the rice bag at my house. Now, why should I pay you that money? Is B justified in doing so? No. The Indian Contract Act says, though A and B never intentionally entered into a contract, but since B has benefited on account of A's unintentional forgetting the rice bag, B has to pay. B is entitled to pay that the cost of the rice bag. If B does not do so, a law will enforce it. A can, uh, you know, go through a proper legal route and make sure that B pays the money. So that is a quasi contract, a contract which the parties do not enter into, but the law creates it. Right? So, what are the essential elements of a valid contract? The essential elements, see, if you remember in the very first slide, I told you all agreements cannot be contracts. All agreements cannot be contracts. For an agreement between two parties, for an agreement to be called a contract, uh, as per the Indian Contract Act, for any agreement to be called a contract and for it to be enforceable by law, there are certain valid essential conditions that need to be present. So, what are those valid essential conditions? Remember these 6 points here: offer, acceptance, consideration, capacity to contract, free consent, and legality of object and consideration. One after the other, we will discuss now each. So there are 6 points here. Remember them. So we will discuss one after the other. What is offer? What is acceptance? What is consideration? And all that. Right. So what is offer? For example, I told you when A goes and asks B, "Will you buy my house for 50,000 rupees?" That is an offer. Okay. So how is it defined in law? Section 2A of the Indian Contract Act. What does it say? It says when one person signifies to another his willingness to do or abstain from doing anything with a view to obtaining the assent of that other to such act or abstinence, he is said to make a proposal. And so in this example, A is telling B that I am willing to give you my house, right? If you make payment of 50,000 rupees. That is why it is an offer, right? So can any statement be taken as an offer? Can any proposal be taken an offer? No, there are some features, there are some essential elements that need to be present in order to make an offer a valid offer. So what are those essential elements or what are those features? The offer must be communicated to the other party. So I want to sell my house to B. I have to communicate this offer to B. I have to go and tell B, either orally, maybe through a telephone, through an email, through a letter, or whatever it is. That offer must be communicated to B. I want to sell my house to B, but except B, I tell 10 other people. That is not offer. Okay. And the second essential element, the offer must be made with a view to obtain the consent of the offeree. That means I am asking B, will you buy my house? With the intention that we should agree to this offer. With the so my main intention behind making this offer should be to obtain the consent or the acceptance or the approval of B. The offer must be in definite and clear terms. So I have to tell A, like, will you buy my house for 50,000 rupees? Within so and so time, you need to make the payment and things like that. So the terms should be definite. The terms should be clear. If I just ask B, will you buy my house? Can that be called an offer? No, that cannot be called an offer. What will we understand? Will we think that this house is for 50,000 rupees or 50 lakh rupees? What will we understand from it? Right? So that is one thing. Next essential element is the offer must be capable of creating a legal relationship. Right? Offer should be such that it should give rise to a legal relationship. So for example, B is my neighbor. I call up B in the evening and say, will you come to my house to have tea or coffee? This is also, so I am asking B for his willingness. So this can be called a proposal. This can be called an offer, but it is not an offer in terms of the Indian Contract Act because this is just a social transaction. A social transaction cannot create a legal relationship. So I ask B to come to have tea with me. B does not come. Can I go and sue B for it? Can I say, no, you said you promised to come for tea and you have not come. Now you have to pay me. What is it? The expenses of the tea or something like that. No. So such kind of social transactions cannot give rise to a legal relationship. So therefore, inviting a person to have food at your place or inviting a person to spend time with you or watch a movie with you, such kind of things cannot be called offer. Now, another thing is offer must express the final willingness of the offerer. So very clearly, A must say, see, I am willing to sell my house to you for this much amount. If there is some doubt, I am thinking of selling my house, I am planning to selling my house, this cannot be offer because when I am telling I am thinking of selling my house to you for 50,000 or I'm planning to sell my house to you for 50,000 or I'm contemplating to sell my house for these statements don't convey final willingness. They only convey thoughts that are going on in my mind. So offer should be such that it should convey final willingness. I want to sell my house to you for 50,000. This conveys final willingness. So this is offer. Then the next thing is an offer should not contain a term, the non-compliance of which would amount to acceptance. So A asks B, will you buy my house for 50,000? Please let me know within 1 week. If you don't reply within 1 week, I will assume that you have agreed, you have given your acceptance. This cannot be an offer. That means offer should not contain any term, any clause in it which says, if you don't do this, I will treat it as acceptance. If you don't tell me, I will treat it as acceptance. If you don't mail me, I would treat it as acceptance. This cannot be offer. An offer cannot contain any condition, any term, any clause in it. The non-compliance, that means non-adherence, you're not following it, of which would amount to acceptance. So if you remember, I told you essential elements of a contract are 6. First one was offer, second one is accept. A has made an offer to B. If B is giving his consent, that is known as acceptance. So A asks B, will you buy my house for 50,000 rupees? B says, yes. Yes is consent. B says, yes, I will buy your house for 50,000 rupees. That is acceptance. Okay. So what, just as we discussed essential elements of a valid offer, we will also discuss the essential elements of a valid acceptance. So what is the first point? Acceptance must be communicated. Okay. So A asks B, will you buy my house for 50,000 rupees? B, if B is saying yes, this yes must be communicated either through words, either through letter, mail, or whatever it is. If acceptance is not communicated, it is no acceptance. So A is asking B, will you buy my house for 50,000? A wants to buy the house. But he did not convey it. He did not communicate it to A. Then this is not acceptance at all. And this communication must be done to the offerer himself. Okay. So A asks B, will you buy my house for 50,000 rupees? B goes and tells his wife, yes, I will buy the house for 50,000. This is also not acceptance. Acceptance must be given to the person who has made the offer, not to anybody else. Acceptance must be given to the offerer himself and not to anybody. It could be his own wife, child, father, mother, anybody, manager, anybody. No, that is not acceptance. Acceptance is only. And then acceptance must be communicated by the person who has the authority to accept. Who has the authority to accept? The person to whom the proposal was made, to the offer was made. So offeree. So A asks B, will you buy my house for 50,000 rupees? Who has the authority to accept? B alone and nobody else. Right? Only B can give the acceptance. A asked B, so only B can give the acceptance. A asked B, but B's son comes and gives acceptance to A. That is not acceptance. Okay? The next point, acceptance must be absolute and unqualified. So again, using the same example, A asks B, will you buy my house for 50,000 rupees? If B says, yes, I will buy it for 50,000. How is this acceptance? This acceptance is complete, absolute. There are no conditions in this. Assume instead of saying yes, I will buy your house for 50,000 rupees, B says yes, I will buy your house, but not for 50,000. I will buy it for 40,000. Now, is this acceptance unqualified? Is this acceptance absolute? No. There is a condition in this. What is the condition? No, it is not for 50,000. It is for 40,000. Now, this is not an acceptance. This is an offer. So, it is like now B is making a fresh offer to A. So, acceptance in order to be valid must be absolute and then acceptance must also be should be given in the prescribed manner. So if A says, will you buy my house? Please let me know by within 1 week's time. You come and tell me, or you send me a message, or you write an email to me, or you write a letter to me. Whatever is the prescribed manner, acceptance should be given in that. So A says, if you want to buy my house, if this offer is okay to you, you send me an email. But instead of that, you do something else, you use some other manner, then that acceptance is not valid. And it should be given in a usual and reasonable manner. So, what is the usual practice followed? Take, for example, A has not mentioned how acceptance needs to be given. If A has not specifically mentioned, then B should follow some usual manner, some reasonable manner, right? And acceptance should be given within the time prescribed or within a reasonable time. If A gives 1 week's time limit, then acceptance should be given within that 1 week's time limit only. If 1 week time limit is passed, then that acceptance is not valid. And one more thing is, acceptance should be given before the lapse of offer. A has asked B, will you buy my house? Right? You tell me within 1 week. You after 1 week, if you're giving acceptance, then that acceptance is not pertaining to that offer because the offer was only valid for 1 week's time. And the last one, and the next one is acceptance cannot be presumed from silence. A says, will you buy my house for 50,000 rupees? B is silent on it. B is neither saying yes or no. Can this be treated as acceptance? No, law does not treat this as acceptance. Law says silence can never be treated as acceptance. If it has to be a proper yes verbally. Okay. Next point is acceptance may be expressed or implied. That means it could be through words. It could be expressed means words. Implied means through action. So, for example, I told you you booked a cab and you went and sat in the cab. That is acceptance. So you're saying while I booked the cab, it showed me from this place 200 rupees per me, and after having seen that, I went and sat in the cab. So what is it? It is an implied acceptance. So it is you are telling that the driver that you drop me from this place to this place, I will pay whatever amount that you have asked for me, whatever amount has been showed in the app, right? So we've discussed offer, we've discussed acceptance. Now, what is the third essential element of a contract? The third essential element is consideration. Consideration is also called as the price of the promise, or it is also known as quid pro quo. Quid pro quo. Quid pro quo means something in return. So, again, let us come back to the same example. A wants to sell his house to B for 50,000 rupees. What is A getting out of this contract? A is getting 50,000 rupees. What is B getting out of this contract? B is getting the house in this out of this contract. So both the parties are getting something in return. That is known as quid pro quo, and that is nothing but consideration. So how does the Indian Contract Act define consideration? Indian Contract Act says that when at the desire of the promisor, the promisee or any other person has done or abstained from doing, does or abstains from doing something, such act or abstinence or promise is called a consideration. So in this example, act, that is B giving his house is consideration. Consideration. Okay. What are the essential elements of a valid consideration? The essential elements of a valid consideration are: the consideration must move at the desire of the promiser. Right? It must move at the desire of the promiser. It can't move at the desire of anybody else. The parties to the contract, the promiser and the promisee, it must only move at the desire of the promiser. The consideration must be lawful. So consideration can't be like, if you give me 50,000 rupees, I will kill your enemy or I will kill your partner or somebody. Right? That is not a lawful consideration. Right? So consideration must be lawful. Only then it becomes a valid contract. And consideration must be real. Consideration must see in the what do I mean when I say consideration must be real? Consideration cannot be physically impossible things like promise to bring back a dead person, right? That is physically impossible. Or a person's arm is amputated, promise to get the arm regrown or something like that. These are all physically impossible things to do. So this cannot be consideration. Legally impossible things. Like, for example, A promises to sell a house to B, which is not owned by A himself. A doesn't own that house. That house belongs to somebody else. But A says, I will sell this house to B. It is legally impossible. Law cannot, that cannot constitute consideration. Then uncertain consideration. Say, for example, will you buy my house for some reasonable amount? So what is the consideration here? Consideration has to be clear. Is it for 50,000, 1 lakh, 2 lakhs, 10 lakhs, whatever it is? That consideration has to be in clear terms. If you are just saying for some reasonable amount, that is an uncertain consideration. Illusory consideration. You know, like illusory things like, I will do this, I will cause rains in your area if you pay me this much of amount, right? I will make sure that, sun is not very hot in your area if you pay me this amount. These are all illusory considerations. They are not practically possible. So these cannot be considerations. The next one, this is interesting. Consideration must not be the performance of existing duties, right? So, for example, um, take for example, you go to an office, you want a caste certificate to be issued to you. You go and ask that the concerned official there. He explains the entire procedure of how a caste certificate is to be issued, and he also says, but you also need to pay me 5,000 rupees. If you pay me 5,000 rupees, only then I will issue a caste certificate, or I'll issue it soon. This this cannot be a valid consideration. Why? Because it is the responsibility of the concerned official to issue caste certificates to people who come and apply for it. He cannot be charging you money to do his existing duty, right? He cannot do that. So consideration must not be performed. See, for example, I am taking this class for students here, for which the university pays me money. Now, I cannot again ask the student, see, if you want me to take the class, if you want me to explain properly, if you want me to teach properly, you have to pay me some extra amount. I can't do that. The university is paying me money to take this class. It is my duty to take a class for you. I cannot again be charging you money for that. So consideration must not be the, or you go to a government hospital. To treat you, the doctor cannot charge money from you because that is the job of a doctor to treat you. That is his duty. He cannot be again charging money from you. Right? The next one is consideration need not be adequate. See, sometimes what happens, somebody says, I have this, 10 kgs of rice bag. I want to sell it for 100 rupees. We might say, see, 10 kgs of rice bag doesn't cost 100 rupees. It costs more than that. So, consideration doesn't seem to be adequate here. But does it mean it is not a valid consideration? No. Sometimes consideration might be less than what it normally is, or sometimes it might be more than what it normally is. But even then, it can be valid consideration as long as it is lawful, as long as it is real, as long as it is moving at the desire of the promiser. Even though it is slightly less or more, it is still a valid consideration. Right? And the next thing is consideration may be past, present, or future. So you can enter into a contract with somebody. You give me 50,000 rupees now. I will do this to you in future. I will perform. Take for example, if I am a singer, I will perform at your concert next month. So this is an example of future consideration, right? So even that is a valid consideration. The fourth point, offer, acceptance, consideration, and the fourth one is capacity of parties, right? So now what the Indian Contract Act says is, see, for people to enter into a contract, they should have the capacity to contract. Now there are certain categories of people who don't have the capacity to contract. Now, who are those people? There are three categories of people who don't have the capacity to contract. The first one are minors. The second one are people with unsound mind. And third one are people who are disqualified from contracting by any law to which they are subject. Okay. So three, minors, people with unsound mind, and people disqualified by law. You know who a minor is. A minor is a person who has not yet completed 18 years of age. So a person who has not yet completed 18 years of age is a minor and cannot enter into a contract with any, that person does not have the capacity to contract. Then second category of people who do not have the capacity to contract is a person with unsound mind. When do we say that somebody has an unsound mind? If that person is not capable of understanding the nature and contents of the contract, if that person is not capable of forming a rational judgment about, for example, I am a minor, I am 17 years of age. No, I'm sorry, we are talking about unsound mind. Take, for example, I am a person, I want to sell my house to X. If I'm not able to understand what is this contract is about, if I'm not able to understand what are the consequences of this contract, then you can say that I do not have a sound mind. I have an unsound mind. So when do we say that a person has an unsound mind? As per law, idiots, lunatics, and drunken or intoxicated people have an unsound mind. So who's an idiot? An idiot is a person who must be having some mental disorder because of which his mental capabilities are permanently damaged. So that person is not at all in a position to understand what is the nature of the contract and things like that. Who are lunatics? As per law, lunatics are people who have, you know, episodes of unsoundness. That means at times they are normal, they have a sound mind. At times they might not be capable of understanding things around them, or they must be having an unsound mind. Like, for example, people who, who are suffering from schizophrenia, that's a mental disorder, right? So those people at times have hallucinations, they have seizures, things like that. But at times they are normal. Such kind of people, as per law, are lunatics. So when they have a sound mind, they can enter into contract. But assume there is a point of time in their life, at that point of time, they are undergoing severe mental distress. At that point of time, they cannot enter into a contract. They do not have the capacity to contract. Then coming to people who are drunken and intoxicated, during that state when they are in that drunken and intoxicated state, they cannot enter into a contract. They do not have the capacity. Otherwise, uh, when they are not intoxicated, when they have come out of that intoxicated state, they can happily enter into the contract. All right. And people disqualified is sometimes, um, uh, uh, when there is a war with the other country, right? When our country is at a war with the other country, then you cannot enter into a contract the people of that country, right? Now, I told you there are three categories of people who cannot enter into a contract. The first one is a minor. So, what happens if you enter into a contract with a minor? The first thing is an agreement with the contract is void ab initio. That means from the very beginning it is a void contract. That kind of contract is not valid in the eyes of law, and the law cannot enforce that contract at any cost. The next point is no estoppel against a minor. See, if you look at the various provisions in the law, all these provisions are designed in such a way that they protect the minor. So, take for example, a minor fraudulently misrepresents. Take for example, I am a minor. I am 17 years of age, but I tell somebody, see, I am a major. I am 20 years old. I want to sell this house to you. But later, I myself say, no, no, no. I am not a. I'm not a major. I am a minor. By mistake, I told you that I am a minor. I am a major, and I can withdraw from that contract. I can do so, and the law will not prevent me from doing that. So a minor can, even if a minor has fraudulently represented his age, at a later point of time, he can withdraw from it. No liability for fraud. Even if a minor commits fraud also, he would not be liable for it. And a minor cannot be insisted for specific performance. Okay. And next point is no ratification. Take for example, I am 17 years old today. Today I enter into a contract with B. After 2 months, I turn 18. Then can I ratify the contract saying that now I am a minor? I can ratify this? No, I cannot. I can enter into a new agreement, new contract, but I cannot ratify an agreement that I made when I was a minor. Okay. Then restoration of property or money can see a minor has fraudulently taken somebody's property or money by misrepresenting his age. Can this property or money be restored from the minor? Yes, it can be restored, provided that property or money is traceable. If it is not, for example, I tell that I am a major and I borrow 50,000 rupees from B, and I started using that. Now, at maybe after 1 day, 1 week, B comes to know that I am a minor and I have fraudulently misrepresented my age and borrowed money from B. Now, can B now come and take back that 50,000? Yes, he can. But assume I have spent 10,000 out of that 50,000. That only remaining 40,000 B can take from me, not the entire. He cannot say that I have given you 50,000, you have to repay that remaining 10 also. No, that cannot happen. Whatever money is still remaining with me, we can take that back. Assume nothing is remaining with me, we cannot take back anything. Can a minor be a beneficiary or a promisee? Yes, a minor can be a beneficiary. A minor can be a promisee, but you cannot. The law will not insist the minor to fulfill anything. That there is not his part of. He cannot be a promiser, but he can be a promisee. And is the minor's property liable for necessaries? Yes, this is a very important clause in the Indian Contract Act. It says, see, a minor is not liable to pay anything, but minor's property that can be used for paying any necessaries. So, take for example, A has borrowed from B for his education, or A has borrowed from B to meet his daily expenses. Like basic things like food, clothing, shelter. A has borrowed money from B. Can B claim that money from A? Yes. If A has any property on his name, B can claim that money because all this money was used for necessaries. If this provision was not there in the law, it would have been very difficult for a minor to even survive. No person would have ever, lent money to a minor. Right? That is one thing. Then A can be a partner, A can be a beneficiary, and A can be an agent also. So, see what happens to an agent in a principal agent relationship. It is a principal who is ultimately responsible, who is answerable, not the agent. Agent is just a representative. So, a minor can be an agent also. So, persons disqualified by law, I told you alien enemies, that means we are at a war with a particular country. people from those countries are called as alien enemies. Foreign Indian US Embassy in India, so employees of US Embassy, right? They are all diplomatic staff. We cannot enter into contracts with them. Insolvents. Insolvents are people who have been declared by law. And convicts, people who are serving imprisonment, who are under imprisonment, they are convicts. So you can, such kind of people cannot enter into any kind of agreements. The next one is free consent. What do you mean by free consent? Free consent is nothing but acceptance, like, acceptance which is willfully given, right? So take for example, I ask B, will you buy my house for 50,000 rupees? And if B says, yes, I will buy your house for 50,000 rupees without any external pressures, without anybody forcing him, or without any, false information, then it is said to, then this kind of acceptance is said to be given out of free consent. Whereas, take for example, I will ask B, will you buy my house for 50,000 rupees? If you don't do so, I will kill you. Or if you don't do so, I will make sure that you lose your job. If you don't do so, if you don't buy my house for 50,000 rupees, I will torture and trouble your family members. So here is B's acceptance or consent free? No. Out of fear, B is accepting. Now, this is not a valid contract. This is not a contract that is enforceable by law, because the consent given here is not free. So, if any consent is given out of coercion, coercion is nothing but threat, committing or threatening to commit any unlawful act, like I will kill you, I will damage your property, I will trouble you, I will torture you, such kind of things. That is coercion. So if one person is compelling or forcing another person to enter into a contract, then it is called as coercion. Undue influence. See what happens, sometimes one person is in a superior position to another person. But what do we mean by superior position? Superior position in the sense, one person is in a position when he is able to influence another person. So, for example, master and servant. A master is at a position where he can influence the servant, or a doctor and a patient, an advocate and a client. Uh, you know, uh, Here, master, doctor, advocate, all these people can influence the servant or the patient or the client to enter into an agreement which they otherwise might not want to. If you're following the recent news, the car accident which happened in Pune, so, the driver said that the the owner is forcing me to accept that I was the one who was driving the car, right? So here the driver is at a weaker position when compared to the owner, the master. So in such kind of relationships, undue influence is said to exist. So wherever undue influence has been used, such kind of an agreement cannot be a valid agreement. Next, coming to fraud. What is fraud? See, sometimes one party uh, gives wrong facts, makes false representation of facts. For example, if I ask B, will you buy my house for 50,000 rupees? This house was built in 1978. But whereas, take for example, the house was actually built in 1958. Now, what is this? I am telling wrong information to B so that B buys my house. I feel that, if I tell B that this house was built in 1948, this would be a very, very old house. B would not buy it. So let me make it 20 years young. Let me say, instead of, okay, let me say it was constructed like 20-30 years later, so B would buy this house. This amounts to fraud, where you're intentionally giving wrong information to the other person so that other person would enter into a contract. This is known as fraud. Misrepresentation also is same as fraud. See what happens in misrepresentation also, you are giving wrong information, false information. But in fraud, that wrong information or false information was given intentionally, whereas in misrepresentation, that wrong information or false information was given unintentionally, without knowing. Correct? The next point is legality of objects and consideration. And the last essential six, I told you, there are 6 elements of essentials of a valid contract. The last one is legality of objects and consideration. Okay. So all agreements or contracts, if they are made for lawful consideration with a lawful object. When do we say that consideration or object is not lawful? See, I have those points are given here. When it is forbidden by law, when law says you cannot do this, right? We cannot physically harm anybody. So if I say I will hit B, right? Or I will take away somebody's property. These are all forbidden by law. Law does not allow you to do all those things. That cannot be a valid consideration. When it defeats the provisions of any other law, right? Directly it might not affect an established law, but indirectly if it is defeating the provisions of any other law, then also that cannot be a lawful consideration. If it is fraudulent, that is, you are by fraudulent means you are doing something, right? If it is injurious to another person or property, like I told you, hurting somebody, killing somebody, damaging somebody's property, these are all unlawful considerations, unlawful objects. When it is immoral, right? Against the established morals of the society, that also cannot be valid object or consideration. The last part that we need to understand is performance and discharge of contracts. Okay, what is performance of a contract? What do you mean by performance of a contract? Performance of a contract is when the parties are fulfilling their obligations. That is performance of contract. So A and B paying 50,000 rupees, is B fulfilling his obligation? A transferring the ownership of property to B, A is fulfilling his obligation. So when both the parties are fulfilling their obligations, we can say that the performance has been discharged. The contract has been performed and the contract is discharged. Right? Who can demand performance? Who can demand performance? Only the promisee can demand the performance. Nobody else. Right? And in case of the death of the promisee, then the legal representative of the promisee can demand performance. No other person can come into the picture. And who can perform the contract? The promisor himself can perform the contract, or the legal representative, or the agent, or the third person. Anybody can do so, right? Next, coming to reciprocal promise. What is a reciprocal promise? See, when a contract consists of exchange of promises, right? One person promises to help another person to find a house, and that other person promises to pay him a commission. That is a reciprocal promise. The one person, there is an exchange of promise here. Such kind of promises are known as reciprocal promises. Coming to the time and place of performance. See, we're talking about performance of contract. When should a performance of contract be done? Two things. If the time has been specified, then yes, within the specified time, the contract should be performed. If there is no time specified, then within the appropriate time, the contract needs to be performed. Same thing applies to place also. Where should the contract be performed? If the place is specified, then at the specified place only. If the place is not specified, then appropriate place, right? That is about this. Next, coming to appropriation of payments. What is appropriation of payments? If there is a debtor who owes multiple debts to the creditor, and the debtor makes payment by specifying which debt should be cleared off, then the payment should be cleared off as per the instructions of the debtor. Assume that the debtor has not specified which debt has to be cleared, then the creditor should first see based on the amount. So if debtor owes 1 lakh, 10 lakhs, and 60 lakhs, and he made a payment of 1 lakh, it becomes obvious that he wants to repay that 1 lakh rupees debt. Assume that is also not obvious. Then obviously it is at the discretion of the creditor to decide which debt can be cleared with this payment. That is what is meant by just a second. That is what is meant by appropriation of payment. Next, come into how can contracts be discharged? Contracts can be discharged by performance, that is both the parties fulfilling their obligation, right? A pays 50,000, B transfers the title or the ownership, that is okay, contract is discharged. Sometimes performance of the contract becomes impossible. Okay, performance of contract becomes impossible, right? A says, I will sell my house to you for 50,000 rupees, but next day, because of earthquake, A's house gets damaged. Now, can A sell that house for 50,000? No, there is no house there at all. How will he sell that 50,000? How will he sell that house to? Right? So that is one scenario. There are multiple scenarios where it is not at all possible to perform the contract. Or take, for example, A says B agrees to buy the house from A for 50,000 rupees, but unfortunately next day B dies. Now what will A do? Can A insist B's legal representative to buy the house? No, he cannot do that because B himself is not there. Sometimes contracts can be discharged by agreement. Both the parties can either renew the contract or both the parties can, cancel the contract. So that way also contract can be discharged. Sometimes law discharges contracts. See, people enter into a contract for some amount, but later they change that. One party changes the amount or one party changes the terms of the agreement. Then that contract is discharged. The law itself discharges that contract. Then by lapse of time. So within contracts can be discharged within a specified time. If that specified time has passed off, then the contract can no longer be discharged. Breaches, where parties to the contract do not stick to their terms and conditions, then the contract is said to be discharged. And what are the remedies for breach of contract? So, if one party has not fulfilled its obligations, what is the option available to the other party? There are these 5 options that you can see on the screen here that are available to the other party. The first one is suit for rescission, that is cancellation. Right? One party can say, I want to cancel this contract. Now, so for example, B has promised to come and perform at my concert, but B has not come on time. B did not fulfill his or her part of the contract. I want this contract to be cancelled. I don't. So that is suit for rescission, cancellation. Suit for damages. B has promised to come and perform at my concert at 8 p.m. But B came at 10 p.m. or something like that. I can ask for damages. Right? Suit for quantum merit. That means as much, take for example, A and B enter into an agreement where B says that B will construct A's house. So B only completed 50% of the construction of the house, and after that, because of some health issues or some uncontrollable reasons beyond the control of B, B is not in a position to construct the house. Now B can claim payment for that 50%. See, I promised to construct the house and take 1 lakh rupees. I could only build half of it. So please, I want A to pay me that 50,000 rupees. That can be demanded by B. Suit for specific performance. See, like I told you, you can ask for damages, you can ask for cancellation, or you can say, no, I don't want damages, I don't want cancellation. I want the other party to do this. I want the contract to be performed as it was specified in the agreement. That also can be done. And the last one is suit for injunction. So there is one party can be restrained by law. Restraint means prevented from doing. One party can be prevented from doing something